What's up, Justin? Good to see you again.
You too. It's been a while.
Yeah, yeah, man, I got to come to Mexico City. So, Justin Petsche, for my audience, just tell us what you're doing right now.
Sure. I represent a company called Torre. We are trying to reinvent recruiting. So think LinkedIn 2.0, or actually LinkedIn 10.0 is a really better description of it, automating recruiting. I am in charge of sales and corporate development. So that's what I've been spending the last year or so doing.
And so we used to run together in LA many years ago, and then you moved to Mexico City. What was the impetus to leave LA and try something in a foreign country versus staying in LA and you know doing that whole thing?
Well, yeah, and you might remember some of this as well, but my first, I think, 4 or 5 years in LA was basically me running a company on my own. And once we started to grow and I was able to get a couple people there, I thought, well, wait a minute, I think I was 30 years old at the time, so quite a while ago now. I thought, well, I can do this from anywhere, really. I've got my team here. So I took off, lived in Southeast Asia for a few years, and then thought I'd get a little bit closer to home and come here to Mexico City on a 3-month trial. And you know how that goes. 7 years later, here I am still.
Yeah, speaking fluent Spanish. It was great visiting you a couple years ago. So I gotta, well, I mean, you're getting married soon, so I guess I won't see you till November. But Mexico City is great, and it was really enjoyable visiting you there. So the last time we talked, we were talking about where things are happening, and you're really into the crypto space, and you were telling me about what states are really doing the whole crypto thing, and where all of that's happening and why it's so important, and the certain politicians that are into it versus not into it. So maybe you could speak on that a little bit.
Yeah, well, and I'm by no means an expert. I kind of fell into this by accident. The company that I had before I started doing what I'm doing now, I sold, and half of that was for Bitcoin. And I didn't know shit about Bitcoin at the time. As a matter of fact, I think the price was like $6,000 or something like that. So I sold most of it, but I ended up holding on to enough to have some fun the last couple of quarters. And the more I learn about it, the more I go down to the rabbit hole, and I wholeheartedly believe it's the future between crypto, blockchain, and all of that. So I'm ingrained a little bit now in the marketplace, but by no means an expert. Most of what's going on is happening in Miami, and the reason is very, very simple: the mayor. And really, what he did is he's acting less like a politician and more like a CEO. And he said, you know what, we want to attract all this business that we know is leaving San Francisco. We want to bring it here. And he's also very passionate about crypto space. So it's become kind of the de facto headquarters in the world, really, for crypto. But there's a couple others as well. Wyoming, because of banking. A lot of the crypto banking is happening in Wyoming because whoever the leaders are, there's a woman named Caitlin Long, I think, and she's got like kind of a new age bank where a lot of the crypto space is happening there. So Wyoming and Texas. Texas has a lot of political leaders that are saying, we were pioneers in the gold age. We also need to be pioneers in this as well. And you've got a couple of companies that are based mainly out of Austin. I think that there's a couple other places as well, but one, Unchained Capital, I think that they're going to do very great things. They've got their headquarters in Austin and a couple more as well.
And what's Unchained Capital?
So Unchained Capital is let's see, depending on how novice you are, you may or may not understand a lot of this, but it's essentially a way to store your crypto and use it effectively like a bank, meaning that you can earn interest on it, you can lend it, but it's known to be one of the most secure places to store your Bitcoin out there. So there's a few ways that you can store it. You can store it in an exchange like Coinbase or Gemini. You can literally what they call cold store it, meaning you've got a physical device and it's all on you, which I have a couple of those.
The safest and the most dangerous.
Exactly.
From the outside world, yep. The most dangerous to yourself. Yeah.
Exactly. And then you've got the kind of the intermediate places like Unchained Capital where they hold a key, you hold a key, someone else holds a key. So it's kind of like a vault for your Bitcoin, but also allows you to utilize it. Mostly people use Unchained Capital to take loans. So I deposit a Bitcoin, it's worth 50K, they'll give me 25K cash loan. And my Bitcoin is secure. I don't need to touch it. I just need to pay the interest payments back.
Yeah, so all that stuff is interesting to me, and blockchain is just super interesting. But with this loan stuff, that I've never really delved into, so I don't understand it. So someone has got $50,000 worth of Bitcoin. I can borrow that and then do what with it? Put a down payment on a house as long as I pay the interest on it, or like, so is it? Because I know you can convert Bitcoin to cash, obviously, but is that what people are borrowing it for?
So there's a couple different ways to think about it. When I say borrow against it, I mean you with your Bitcoin acting like your own bank. So I've got, let's just say, just for rounding purposes, I've got 2 Bitcoin. I put them with Unchained Capital. It's worth 100K. What Unchained Capital will do is use that 100K as collateral, give me half of it in cash. I can go buy a car with it, or I can, for my business or for a house or for whatever. And I make payments. The interest payments right now are relatively high, but I believe that they'll come down. So essentially, I'm my own bank. That's essentially what I meant by that. I can also lend my Bitcoin. As a matter of fact, I can't remember if you can through Unchained Capital, but you can lend your Bitcoin through BlockFi, through Gemini, through a company called LEDN, Ledin out of Canada. And what happens is I say, instead of giving you my Bitcoin and taking a loan out, and I give you my Bitcoin and you pay me an interest payment because you're lending out my Bitcoin to major institutions on the back end.
Yeah, I've
What are
heard
they doing? Yeah, well, BlockFi is now, I think, valued at like $3 or $4 billion. So
Where are they out of?
they're out of New York, and I think that they'll be one of the major players in the space.
So who are the California guys doing this? Because I guess it started, most of the tech came out of the Bay Area, right? Is that?
Not really. So the tech, I mean, if you've ever heard of Satoshi, really, it's a pseudonym. Nobody knows who it is or essentially where it came from. But yeah, a lot of the early days in the space was San Francisco meetups. But so there are some companies that came out of that space. I think Kraken came out of that space. But San Francisco has never been a headquarters of the space. Maybe you could argue that very much in the early days because it was revolved around a bunch of nerdy techies there and going to meetup groups. But the major players, the major organizations, almost none of them are based out of San Francisco.
So do you see any California politicians that are touting blockchain and cryptocurrency? Because I think that might be one of those things that could help save, California. There's so many smart people there. There's so much technology, and there's so much infrastructure for that type of stuff. But obviously, there has to be support for it. So.
Yeah, I've never heard anything come out of California, and there may be some reasons for that. I think when you think about the people who are kind of the OGs in the space, a lot of them are not anti-Silicon Valley, but maybe a little bit. And that's why they've dispersed. And that's why almost none of the companies that I can think of. Now, I'm sure I'm forgetting some, and I'm sure that there's a few in the Valley.
But that's interesting that Austin is one of the spots, because a lot of Silicon Valley is moving to Austin, and maybe not just Austin. They may not be leaving Silicon Valley altogether, but there's a lot happening in Austin. So the fact that these blockchain guys are already there is just probably going to promote. I don't know a ton about blockchain, but from the way I remember it being described, it's just Internet 2.0, basically, right? And then the coins are like websites, if you were going to put it in that way, because each coin does something, right? No?
Kind of. Yeah. Well, the answer to that is I don't know either, but it kind of depends. Think of the coins. Most of the coins are relatively worthless. I mean, think of a coin like they call them ICO, an initial coin offering, because it's something new. They need to raise capital. So instead of IPO, it's ICO. But the difference is in ICO is more like investing not in an IPO of a company. It's more like investing in their pre-seed or seed round. Like they're raising capital by selling this coin and you're buying it and you have no clue if they're going to succeed or what they're doing. But essentially the ICOs became a way for these companies to raise capital. Yeah. And most of them went bust. Now the blockchain can be described in many different ways. I'm not really an expert. I'm not an expert at all, but yeah, a lot of people say Web 3.0. I think there's like 4 experts in the world
Yeah, yeah, and I know I'm putting you on the spot here because I know this is not your industry. Your industry
Right.
is you're a sales guy. But whenever I hear that you're interested in a space and you start talking about it, then I get interested. Because I know you've made a good life for yourself and you've done a lot of things with all of uh, anything you've ever started is turned out pretty well. So I was already involved in coins and stuff too, but just because tech guys were telling me about it a few years ago. I think I started buying Bitcoin when it was like around $6,000, and now it's like what, almost 60. So I'm like, wow, this is incredible, right? And then I was really heavily invested in XRP at, I think I was buying it at 22 cents, and now it just, I think the high so far has been like a buck 25 or something.
Matter
So
of fact, you the last time you spoke, which was less than 2 weeks ago, you said, "Hey, are you going to buy XRP?" And it was at 50 cents. It's doubled in the last 2 weeks.
yeah, yeah. One of my clients, really, really, really smart kid. I was telling him, hey, you've made all this money. You got to put some of this in into real estate because it's very, it's dependable. It's just with the taxes and everything. It just is one of those things you should be putting some money. And he's like, nope. He's putting 100K a pop into these coins. And I'm like, hey, what are you doing? And he's like, if you don't trust me on anything else, trust me on XRP. And I'm like, all right, just to satisfy you, I'll buy some XRP. And then I bought some, and I'm like, wow, this kid was onto something. Because it really, that 22 cents multiplied by the amount that you buy, that jumps up to a buck 25. And, so
Yeah,
anyway.
a lot of
Yeah.
money to be made, and most people will end up losing a lot of money. I think, personal opinion, I think the only new and real advancements in technology that's come out of this so far is Bitcoin. All the rest are incremental technological changes based upon that one. So that's why I think most of the coins that have come out, most of them have trended to zero, and I still think that will be the case.
Yeah, someone else just, people describe it to you a bunch of different ways, and like you said, there's only 4 experts in the world, so who knows, right? Who knows if what you're hearing is right? But when someone was describing it to me, because I didn't understand the difference between Bitcoin and Ethereum, right? And they were saying, okay, think of Bitcoin as gold. It's like the original. It has value. It's going to always have value for everybody, but it's a slower payment system, right? So you can't chip off a piece of gold and buy a car, and so Ethereum is like faster than Bitcoin. So think of that like silver, right? So it's okay. I can use it for more things, right? I can also use it to build things, and I can also use it for commerce and all these different things. And now all of these other things are like separate types of money. They have value. So some are going to have value. This coin is similar to the Rwanda, whatever, right? So it might not have that much value, but this one, might. So that's the way he described it to me. I don't know if that's the way you understand it.
I've heard that as well. I think a lot of it comes down to narratives, and the two major coins out there between Bitcoin and Ethereum, they just have very different narratives. Not only narratives, they actually have very different use cases.
Yeah.
And Bitcoin started as, hey, peer-to-peer electronic payments, and whether or not that was the original goal, I don't know. But the narrative has now changed as store of value. We don't need it to buy our coffees. We need it to store our wealth. Ethereum was meant to essentially be more transactional between developers. So the use case is just very, very different. Now, usability, Ethereum might actually be more usable, even though in Bitcoin transactions are significantly larger. But the difference is Ethereum is, how do you, there's no limit to how many coins could be out there. They're changing the protocols. So it's kind of like saying, well, do we believe that the changes are going to be good? Because we don't know. There's a lot of I don't knows about Ethereum that have been proven with Bitcoin. So what could happen is Ethereum could end up going through a massive boom and everything could work out and your returns might be better with Ethereum, but it's still more like gambling because Bitcoin is all about security, safety. It's been around longer. And now the narrative has changed, is You and I don't need to go and buy coffees with Bitcoin. Now with the Lightning Network, which is story for another day, we probably will be able to. But the Bitcoin narrative now is, well, wait a minute, there's 21 million coins. That's it. 20% of them are probably gone or lost, meaning that this is a much, much better gold for a digital age. There's going to be no more, which, you know, if you cut out all we need to worry about for price is demand, because supply is set, which is unlike anything out there. It's just a very different narrative. So there's some things that scare me with Ethereum. I still own a little bit of Ethereum, but 90% of what I have in crypto is in Bitcoin, 95 probably.
Good for you. Yeah, so this really isn't a Bitcoin channel or whatever, but I just, it just interested me if and I knew you were keeping up with who was doing what in what space, even though you're not a blockchain expert. And so I was just curious if you'd heard anything out of California. Any plans to ever go back to California? I know Mexico City is amazing, but.
I don't think so. There are things I miss about California. I'm sure you do as well. As a matter of fact, we could probably talk about the good old days for a while, but I think now every time I go back, actually, I went back to visit you the last time I went back to visit you. You and I always have a good time, but the city of LA, I thought, it just does not feel the same as it did, a decade ago. You might be able to say that because of age or because of it, or in any city, but that's kind of my feeling. And I think that now, because the whole world is remote, you can live wherever you want. Even if I went back to the States, it would probably be somewhere else.
So previous to to what you're doing now, I can't remember what you were doing. You were consulting for some company in Mexico City.
I was doing two things. I had a consulting company where we were working with fintech companies, mostly from Europe. I like to try to make it sound complicated and complex. Really what we were is a sales and distribution arm for fintechs in Europe into Latin America. So we put, we had relationships with distributors in Uruguay, in Colombia, in Costa Rica, the Dominican Republic, Colombia. We were putting other offices in other places when one of the companies that we had a contract with just offered to kind of buy us out for those relationships. So that was one thing. And then the other thing was I had a small fintech company of my own, and we were an analytics tool for traders of anything really, from Forex to futures, even real estate, where you could aggregate information from multiple different brokers. It would show you any analytics you would want to see or run, and then it would take it one step farther, and you could run reports that would actually look like you were one of the major hedge funds in the world. So you could be a trader with $2,000 and you could be doing an analytics and reporting like you were a massive hedge fund.
You still have that technology? I might need it for real estate.
And actually, because of crypto, it might be more valuable now. No, that company ended up being a failure. I was working with a partner.
But you didn't keep the technology though?
So we ended up selling the technology to a small hedge fund based out of Stamford, Connecticut, basically out of New York. Hedge fund no longer exists, so that maybe tells you about some of their business choices. And then it was a SaaS play. So then we also had a list of customers that we ended up selling to, kind of like a financial educator out of Nashville, Tennessee, of all places. So no, we don't have the technology anymore. It wasn't overly sophisticated. We ended up selling thinking it was going to be a SaaS for retail traders. We ended up having more luck with kind of small to mid-sized brokers that didn't have in-house technology teams to build it for themselves. So they would white label it from us. Well, we got the revenue, I think it was up to like 200K one year, but then it started to drop real fast, and it's just not a business that we were passionate about. So we ended up just selling it off for parts, essentially.
So with being in Mexico, I've been hearing rumors and seeing some things that manufacturing is moving over to Mexico. That's US manufacturing, Chinese manufacturing, and European manufacturing. So apparently China's gotten to a place with its middle class that its labor force is too expensive now. And so they're moving it over to Mexico. Have you been hearing those grumblings?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the reason that you just mentioned, labor is cheaper here in Mexico as well, and getting more comparable to China. And then you don't have the massive shipping costs. Actually, one of my very good friends has a zipper manufacturer that was started in Taiwan. They've got plants in China. They started one here in Mexico about a decade ago, and now they've basically got all their business here. So it's definitely a trend that's becoming, real.
Yeah, that's interesting. So when you talk about manufacturing, you're talking about, mostly an uneducated labor force. I wonder why people coming up from Central America don't want to stop and take those opportunities in Mexico, because it seems like, uh, any type of any country that begins a manufacturing base, at some points the jobs become higher paying, people start becoming middle class, and then you don't have that cheap workforce anymore, labor force anymore, right? So at some point that's going to happen to Mexicans in Mexico, where the middle class is going to expand, and so then they're going to have um, a working class labor force from somewhere else, just like China had to move it, to Mexico.
Yes is the answer to that, but what happens here in Mexico is you've got these massive gaps between so the middle class here in Mexico has been growing for a decade, and it's huge, and there's so much money here. But the gap between the ultra wealthy and the middle class is huge, like it is in many places. And the gap between the middle class and your average, Mexican citizen is massive. And I can give you kind of an example from my business. I could hire a salesperson, college educated, bilingual, and a decent salary for them in a fintech company would be $700 a month, maybe some
Wow.
commissions. So you've got a long ways to go before you get there, I think.
Okay, so that might make more sense. Maybe there isn't uh, jobs in Mexico for Central Americans, if there's plenty of Mexican labor. Um,
And there is, and the dream of if you're Guatemalan or from El Salvador isn't necessarily to come to Mexico. It's to get farther north, just because those are the types of jobs that you're going to get here. I actually think $700 a month, if you earn that or more, you're in the middle class technically in Mexico. So that's how kind of far down still that we are. But also, I'm pretty sure just because there's so much workforce that in that area, that there are also some immigration laws that stop that because it's not needed. There's plenty of workers here.
yeah. When I came to visit you in Mexico City, I don't remember it being that inexpensive. I mean, it was certainly less expensive, and you took me to the equivalent of the Beverly Hills in Mexico City, so it certainly wasn't the same as Beverly. I mean, look wise and feel wise, it was just as good as Beverly Hills, but price wise, it wasn't. But I don't remember it being so inexpensive that you didn't look at the check or whatever.
Definitely not. Mexico City, you're talking about 20 some million people. I don't know, how big, but if you consider, think of the table or the desk in front of you, if that whole thing is Mexico City, the parts I took you to would be no bigger than, this case. So inside that, yeah, you're talking about it's still Mexico, but it's more, first world-ish. So
Oh,
you're going to pay
that
less
was
than you
amazing.
do. But you leave there and, you go to places like Guadalajara, Oaxaca, all these different places, you're going to have a hard time spending $100 on a dinner for two with all the wine you want to drink. But here in certain areas in Mexico City, certainly where I took you is not the place
Yeah, what was that
where you.
steakhouse? Because that's still the best steak I've ever had.
I am,
That
well,
is
and that's
by
actually
far the best steakhouse I've ever been to. What was it called?
that's actually a chain. It's called Sonora Grill, and it's
Oh, really? That's it? It's a chain? That thing was
yep,
amazing. It
and
looked
it's
so artisan that I didn't realize it was a chain.
yep, and it's amazing. You're not wrong that it's amazing, but yeah, it's a chain. All right,
Yeah,
next time you're down here, I got to take you to some more traditional places. That's for sure.
yeah. All right. Well, I know I've taken about 30 minutes of your time, so I don't want to take too much time. But you, as the consummate entrepreneur, and I know you've left California, so that's not the advice I'm looking for. But for a Californian or anybody, what would be your advice for an entrepreneur that's just starting?
Well, in what case? How to run the business, where to live, or in anything in
No,
general?
meaning, so a lot of people ask me, advice, right? And then I
Mhm.
have a few points that I always give. One of them being make sure that you're actually an entrepreneur. Because
Uh-huh.
I think some people are born with it, and you certainly can learn it. But there are a lot of people that think they're entrepreneurs, and then one failure and they quit. Well, you're not an entrepreneur because entrepreneurs fail many times before they hit that one thing. That's an entrepreneur. So
Fair.
that's one of the advice I get. Like, hey, are you sure? And then I tell them the story of the wolf and the dog. I'm sure you've heard that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
So
think I'm pretty sure you told me that over the first beer that we ever had.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah, there's definitely a couple of things that I think are important, and the first is if so many people ask for advice before they actually do something, and I think that that's the reverse of how you go out and do something at least a little bit, and then start to ask for advice. The second thing is you're capable, I guarantee you, because every human in the world is, of so much more than you think you are. So if it's something that you're looking at doing, just do it and be absolutely fearless about it. And then, yeah, the last thing is don't underestimate how hard you're going to work, and just be okay with it from day one. I think is
yeah,
no matter how often people told me that, I was like, yeah, yeah, whatever. And then you eat, sleep, breathe it, and that's what it requires to succeed this day and age.
yeah, yeah. And that's one of your strong suits is just the sheer Midwestern work ethic that you have. So
Well,
I remember you went to Mexico with like $1,500 or no place to live. Like, what was that story behind that?
yeah, I think when I got here, it was $700. I was living in the maid's quarters on a roof. Yeah, it was not a great experience. I was 33 years old at the time, if I'm not mistaken. And it's
Yeah,
just the good thing about that particular situation is there is no alternative. So,
yeah, yeah.
but
You burn the ships, right?
well,
That's great
exactly.
though, and you know that you're obviously, and I know you well enough to say this. So you're obviously smart and well read and well traveled and all these things. But lots of people are that, and so it's when you look at it, it's just that other thing. It's just that the fearlessness and the hard work, and then everything else will fall in place. Even if you don't get to the ultimate goal that you want to get to, you'll either get to something just as good, something better, or close enough there where you're like, all right, it's at least better than where I was, and people just don't understand that. They think, oh well, it's too hard, or whatever it is that stops people from being entrepreneurs. But entrepreneurs, they make the world go round. So
I agree. And, you've been kind of one of my mentors in
oh, I
that. So,
appreciate you
so
saying that.
no,
Yeah,
I appreciate that.
hope
And
I've given you
actually,
good advice.
well, back to your comment, I've always looked to you to kind of be one of the I don't consider myself to be overly intelligent or anything like that. So to me, it's either, you work harder or you die. So if you've got the intelligence behind it, and the work ethic, um,
Yeah, I think
go
the
for it.
work ethic is the biggest thing. I think the work ethic, because anything works if you work it. Maybe not as
Yeah.
perfectly as you want it, but yeah. Well,
Yeah. And
anyway,
to
I
your point,
appreciate it, Justin. Huh?
yeah,
Go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was just going to say to your point that, even if none of those things happen where you get something better than you want or you get close or whatever, even if you fall on your face, it's still a positive. It's something that you're
Yeah,
going to take away forever into the next opportunity. But
yeah.
anyway, always
All
great
right.
to speak
So
with you.
so after we're done recording, don't go away. We'll
Yeah,
talk a few more minutes off camera, but yeah. All right. Well,
sounds
thanks.
good.
Appreciate it.
Yep.